been the news story of the day. The sad news that the king of pop, Michael Jackson, has died at the age of 50. Sky News ran these pictures earlier. The star suffered a suspected heart attack at his home in Los Angeles at around midday yesterday. Paramedics were called to the singer's Beverly Hills home after he stopped breathing and rushed him to UCLA Medical Center. Sadly, on his arrival, doctors' attempts to resuscitate him failed and he was pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m. The cause of his death is unknown until the results of his autopsy. Now, obviously, we've had so much response from all around the world. I mean, Madonna herself, she's been quoted as saying, "I can't stop crying over the sad news. I've always admired Michael Jackson. The world has lost one of its greats, but his music will live on forever." And I think that's something that we all feel, really, isn't it, today? A sense of shock.
Well, yeah, shock, but I have to say, not surprised, really, because, I mean, I just bought tickets on Wednesday for the O2, and I was always optimistic that I would see him, because it was one of those things I thought, I've got to see him. I don't, you know, we talked about it on the show before, didn't we? And everyone was saying, you know, you don't want to see him like that. But I just wanted to see him. And last night when I found out, we were all at a party, weren't we? And people were sort of, you know, there was something happening and the news was on and people were in the kitchen watching Sky News. And I have to say, to start with, I didn't actually believe it. I thought, you know, because of the concerts, I never actually thought he would get here. I never thought he would do them, even though, you know, I had this optimism. And I thought, no, maybe he's just trying to get out of it, or, you know, there's something going on. And I didn't actually believe it until, you know, it was confirmed this morning when I woke up. So, and I am shocked, but I'm really sad. I'm really sad because he was such a brilliantly talented person and, you know, just such a sad man, really.
Well, obviously, you know, I mentioned there we've had tributes coming in from all around the world, but we're going to talk to someone now who actually was a friend of Michael Jackson's, Terry George. Terry, are you there?
I'm here, hello.
Good morning to you, Terry. Thank you so much for joining us today. What was your reaction when you heard the news last night?
Well, before the news broke on TV, I actually got a telephone call from somebody who was in the States, and they told me that Michael had been rushed into hospital. So I switched on the news channels, couldn't see anything apart from one channel just starting to show some information. Then all the news channels started talking about it, and I was then informed that he had actually died from the person who was in the States at the hospital. And I said, well, it can't be, because it's not saying it on the news. And they said, no, I'm telling you, he's definitely died. And I was absolutely devastated, like most of the people in Britain and around the world. You know, it's an absolute upsetting time for everybody, I'm sure.
Terry, how do you know Michael, and how well do you know Michael?
Well, I met him when I was 13, which is back in 1979 originally, and we became friends then. I knocked on his hotel room door and asked him if he could do an interview, and he agreed, and he was there with the rest of the Jacksons. I was with him for about 2 hours on that occasion, and then went back the next day and the next day, and we then swapped telephone numbers and addresses, and we kept in touch with each other right up to the age of me being 21.
And although, you know, the both of you must have had very, very different backgrounds and different sort of upbringings, what was the connection between you both? And was there a difference between the Michael that you knew and the Michael that we saw, the public persona?
Well, definitely. I mean, he was a very generous, very kind, caring man. And I used to call him from school, and because we got our telephone cut off at home because of our telephone bills of over £300, and it meant that we got our phone cut off after the hours of conversations that I used to have with him. And we'd sit and we'd talk to each other down the phone, sing to each other down the phone, and we just had great conversation. And he was a different man to what people had portrayed him, to what the press had portrayed him. He was very, very caring, and just before I started doing the interview, when I very first met him, he paused the interview and took a telephone call. And this telephone call was to a small child who was on a life support machine in America. And he would have this conversation every single day to keep this person alive. And I was very touched at that time.
Now, Terry, obviously there's been a lot of speculation as to whether the stress of the upcoming tour that he was going to do, the concert dates at the O2, may have contributed to his death. Obviously we can't know that just yet, but was he well enough, do you think? Did you speak to him or see him recently?
Well, I've been in contact with him again recently. There was a project that I was working on that he was going to get involved in. And I don't want to talk too much about that at the moment for reasons that I can't tell you. But I think the stress of the court case that he had, everybody thought was going to take him over the edge, including myself. And when he came out the other side of that and became well and started looking like things were getting more positive and it was more upbeat, I thought it was here forever. I really like called Gone Too Soon, which is a memorial website, and it's named after one of Michael Jackson's songs, Gone Too Soon. And I never for one moment expected Michael Jackson to be on the front page of Gone Too Soon and thousands of people coming and leaving tributes for him. That was the last thing I ever expected right at this moment in time.
And I think many of us feel the same way, Terry. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. That was Terry George. Now, we've often talked about Michael Jackson on the programme. Sherrie, you've been a lifelong fan of his.
Absolutely, like all of us have. You know what he just said gone too soon, didn't he? And isn't that the case? He's gone too soon. You know what I think? It's quite upset me that, actually. I don't know about you, but he's one of those people, isn't he? You know, like Monroe, and you know, people like that maybe he'd done everything. We'd seen the very, very best of Michael Jackson, hadn't we? Maybe there was no more to see, and I think really it was his time to go.
For people to understand, about the kind of talent that he had and the uniqueness of him, is that when you are a legend, when you are that level of talent, the point is you actually can't relate to all of us, and we all want to relate to make him in our sights. And hearing Terry talk about him, yes, there's always somebody underneath, but the sadness for him as a boy, all through his childhood, all the way people treated him, he could never relate to being ordinary. That's the tragedy. And in a way, if he'd carried on, in a way, there's a bit of me that's glad he's gone like other legends. You know, who wants him to grow old? And
well, it's very, very like, isn't it, Elvis? Don't you feel like?
Well, anybody,
you know,
like that.
I mean, I remember last night thinking, oh God, this is a strange Elvis moment, that we all kind of, the whole world went, oh, Michael Jackson, like we did with Elvis.
And
you know,
he would have loved that. That's the other point, you know, people at that level, aren't they, Sherrie? It's not like you and me and our little acting bit. And I think the tension of doing that tour can't be ignored. You know, if you multiply it 1 trillion times the nerves you get on a wire doing a performance, to have that responsibility and not knowing which way the press were going to jump on you, whether they're going to support you, always the fans would have done.
You know,
and that's what you have to go back to, the fans.
He's one of those people, isn't he, that you always said, I must see Michael Jackson.
Exactly.
I must see. Before I die, I must see Michael Jackson.
1988. Oh,
I'm gutted. I'm absolutely gutted that I never
and I
got
did
to see
it
him or
because
meet
I
him.
had to see him. He's the one. There's very few people that would move me into getting a ticket. 1988.
Really?
And because to me he was a legend, and my kids have been brought up on it. The boys we've got, are just amazing. Really. Just
you touched on something there, though, Lynda, where you said that he was different to the rest of us. And I think, you know, we've mentioned some incredible icons of our time. You touched on Elvis, obviously Marilyn Monroe.
Frank Sinatra.
And also Princess Diana. There was a feeling last night as the news started to come in, and as you watched the rolling news this morning, the flowers and the tributes and this sort of thing. I mean, do you think that we are going to see the same sort of outpouring of grief, the same sort of feeling that we did?
The same kind of love. I think everybody in the world, you can feel it, can't you?
Yeah.
And it's one of those,
always been like that.
And it's one of those moments you'll always say, do you remember where you were when Michael Jackson, isn't it? It's one of those moments we'll always say that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the thing is, I never met him, I didn't know him, and so I'm not going to get emotional about it. So it's not, you know, it's sad in a sense that we've lost someone, you know, so brilliantly talented, and so young. You know, it does drive it home. I'm nearly his age, 1 year off his age, and you know, at just 50, I find that, you know, a little bit.
He had a life. What a life!
Oh yeah, he did. Absolutely.
Not an ordinary life, not an ordinary death. That's how it should be for a legend.
The other thing is, I feel really sad for his family. You know, you think, oh, it's Michael Jackson, he's a legend, you know, he's a talented artist and everything, but he's still a person, and he had a family, he had children, and he had, you know, his mother, and he's got brothers and sisters, and it's just seeing them on the news. That's the saddest thing for me, just seeing them being heartbroken.
Absolutely, and you've